Hello, welcome to Gardener's World. We've had a little bit of an accident, and a big gust of wind has brought down this climbing rose from the apple tree, and in the process has broken it. This is a climbing rose, a very vigorous one, called Souvenir de Malmaison, and it's very prone to black spot. It's a lovely rose, beautiful, but it's not at all healthy compared to the other roses here. And I'm not sure it's going to survive the kind of twisting and tying in needed. So what I've decided to do is cut it right back, and the new growth with more light around it, more air, will be healthier. So this has given me an opportunity to do a bit of radical pruning. Just take that off. Right, I'm going to reduce this down. There you go. I mean, what's extraordinary is how roses develop these incredibly strong stems. I mean, that's a walking stick. Now, can you see here, we've got a good new shoot, so that's where I'm going to take it to. Okay, I think that would be fine now. I can re-establish the rose and actually tie it in to the reduced framework that I've got now of the tree. But we must push on, because we've got lots on today's programme. We catch up with Sue in her garden as she gets stuck into some seasonal experiments.
I'm taking a different approach to growing my tomatoes this year. Normally I grow cordons, so I've decided to try some bush varieties.
We meet a gardener who has become completely immersed in the fascinating world of compost.
At least 59% of the life on Earth is actually in our soils. It's the most biodiverse ecosystem on the planet.
Francis celebrates the glory of Wisteria in all its forms.
One writer said, they need no nicety of management and are impatient of the knife, which is a nice way of saying they're tough as old boots and they grow like mad.
And we visit a garden that is packed with colourful combinations.
There's one where a plant has fallen over, and it's a hesperus, and I think the purple and the red are fantastic. So I didn't stand it up because I think it looks so beautiful.
Last week, I was saying that here on the Mound, the yellow was looking fantastic, but there was an absence of blue. And the colour scheme on the Mound is soft yellow and soft blue. So the daffodil avalon, absolutely ideal. The forget-me-nots, which have come out in the last week, perfect, but I need more of them. The tulips I've got here in pots, I've got ivory floridel, and this year I've grown for the first time a double tulip called Verona. It's a very, very pale yellow, but when you look into it, there are depths of yellow. However, you can see, you can't help but see, this, which I think is request, has somehow got into the mix, but that will be removed. But what I want to do is add some blue. This is a vinca. It's Vinca minor, a periwinkle, and this is a variety called Hawaii. And Vinca is a classic ground cover plant. It'll grow well in shade, it doesn't mind dry conditions, and this can get quite shady. So I'm going to put it high up on the bank so it will spill down and other plants can grow through it. That's perfect. I put two on that side, so I want to make sure I've got two on this side. Ned, of course, is adding to the yellow and blue colour theme because he's brought out today a perfectly colour-coordinated toy. I'd like to think that he has different coloured toys for different parts of the garden. Not true, is it? Now, what I've got here is Brunner macrophylla. And the difference between the forget-me-nots that we've got running along the bottom here and so many in the cottage garden is that they are biennials. So you sow the seed in late spring, early summer, The plants germinate and develop and then flower the following spring and then die, having set seed. Brunnera is a perennial, best planted in small groups. And these long stems, these tiny flowers, work wonderfully well when intermingled around daffodils. And if you want more plants with Brunnera, it's very simple, you just divide them. The one thing these don't want is to be in full sun. So they must have at least half the day in shade. Right, all I've got to do now is just make a hole, stick them in the ground. I've deliberately put this vinca in amongst a patch of weed. Now, the real problem at the moment is lesser celandine. The flowers are lovely, the little bright yellow flowers, and the foliage dies back to nothing by about the end of May. So they're not that intrusive, but they spread and they can carpet a whole area like this. So celandine has little tubers, and they're very brittle. And whenever you dig or anything disturbs the soil, they break, and each one will produce a new plant. So the more you try and dig them out, the more likely you are to actually spread it, unless you can get rid of all of it in an area. Right, the vinca. Nice plant, good roots. You can see that these borders are very much work in progress, but then the whole of Longmeadow is work in progress. And that means changing and adding and assessing. And I think all of us at this time of year are making the most of the lovely blossom and the flowers that are emerging, but also planning and buying plants and setting ourselves up for the year to come. And down in Sue's garden, that is no different. And last month, we went along to pay her a visit.
It's a lovely day and the garden is greening up at a ferocious pace, and it's made me feel it's time for a bit of spring cleaning of my seeds. I don't know whether you're the same, but I've kept a lot of old seed that's out of date and it's cluttering up my seed store. So I've got poppies, I've got cosmos, I've got zinnia, and I've got this one here which is 5.5p, which means it can't be any younger than 1984. It probably won't come up, but that's half the fun of experimentation. I'm going to mix them all up. I'm not going to sow them in rows. I'm going to broadcast them. I've kept a list of what they are so I can see what's a success and what's a failure. And this is a really exciting thing to do. And, you know, who knows if I will be lucky with my 1984 status. And it'll be a miracle. But nothing ventured, nothing gained. So a spoonful at a time, and then I'm putting them into a mixture of soil and garden compost, and I'm just going to sort of thinly scatter them over. This box will act like a nursery bed, so instead of having to sow them in lots of individual containers, I've got them here. But it doesn't mean to say they've got to stay here. I can move them on once I've identified them and plant them in different places in the garden where I've got spaces during the summer. And ideally, some of the seeds would need slightly different growing conditions from others, but they've got to take their chances. And I'm sprinkling all the seeds, and I'm going to just pressure them in a bit with my foot, just to make sure they've got good contact with the soil, and then I'm going to water them in. So who knows what's going to happen? Bets are on. Will it be the 40-year-old status, or will it be the brand new cosmos that germinates? I'm taking a different approach to growing my tomatoes this year. Normally I grow cordons, which you train up and they can grow up to about 6 foot, and you've got to tie them in and you've got to pinch out the side shoots. And that's, to be honest, is a bit of a faff. So I've decided to try some bush varieties. These are Tumbling Tom. I decided to go to the most foolproof cherry tomato I could find. As a bush variety, Tumbling Tom don't need pinching out, and they're only going to grow to 30 centimetres, so that's an ideal table height, so I can reach really easily and harvest really easily. But when I sowed them, only 4 came up, so I planted some more seedlings, but I was a bit lazy and I just chucked them in with the spare spaces with the sweet peas. And now they've got 2 true leaves, it means they're ready for potting on. And I want to just separate them without really touching the roots. I'm going to do that because that's what people say to do, to break them up, but I think they also need a little bit of a pull. So pull them by the tops if you can. If you've got lots of lovely fingers, you hold it by the leaves, but I do it like this and they always survive. So I'm going to pot on this plant, so using a big dibber, getting right to the bottom of the pot and popping it in as low as it can go, but I don't want to cover the top 2 leaves. With bush tomatoes, they crop almost all together. You can get a glut, or if they haven't ripened enough, you'll get all your tomatoes green at the end of the season. But I love green tomatoes, and to me, you can never have a glut of tomatoes because you can never have enough tomatoes. This is my play area, and at the moment I'm playing with the colour pink, and I've got the Pittosporum Bano Bay, I've got a Sambucus nigra black lace, and I've got the Heucheras black pearl, and also these absolutely beautiful hellebores. And what I want to bring in here is a different sort of flower head form. And last year I started growing grasses, and I don't know what's taken me so long, they're great. And I grew Pennisetum redhead, and it wasn't quite the colour that I expected. And this year I bought Pennisetum Carly Rose, which is supposed to be a silver pink, but I don't trust it, so I'm putting it in a pot to see how it develops. If it looks good here, I will keep it here. And if it doesn't look quite the colour that I expected, I will move it elsewhere in the garden. And that's the joy of having an area just to play with. You can get it wrong if it's in pots. You haven't invested all that digging time. I'm growing some more trained apple trees, and this one is George Cave. Now, George Cave came from a small town, Dovercourt, which is in Essex, which is also where my great-grandfather came from, and he was a market grower. Now, I've had many happy holidays down at the beach there, and I wanted to bring a bit of Dovercourt back into the garden, so when I saw it, I snapped it up. But unfortunately, talking of snapping, the top of it has snapped, and there's now some damage and disease getting down the main stem, so I'm going to have to take some quite drastic action to try and halt it spreading. I'm going to have to make a cut here, which is not ideal. The beauty of training fruit is you can have it exactly the height you want, whether it's step over waist height, or for me at my hand height, so it makes harvesting and pruning easier. And also I want to be able to see the view behind. Now, pruning this isn't ideal because it's too low, but with a little bit more judicious pruning later on in the season, I should get it to the height that I want. Last year, I grew Agisash alabaster, and I grew it in this border, and it got completely bullied out by the hydrangea Annabelle. So I dug it up and I overwintered it in the greenhouse, and I'm going to put it in my wild white border on this side, which is a bit more sunny. Agistache likes full sun, and it can grow up to 90 centimetres, and the seed heads look really good all winter, so it's a real good all-year-round plant. In order not to disturb the daffodils and the breeze of grasses, I was pre-prepared, and I made the hole and I marked it with a similar-sized pot, so I shouldn't have to dig anymore. I'm going to put a tiny bit of soil in the bottom just to give it a little bit of a boost. Sprinkle that in the bottom, and then I'm going to pop it in. There's a lovely root system. Just pop it in the hole. It worked, which is great. I found that putting a pot in where you want something definite is a really easy way of planting later on. Everything stays happy around it. Agistache aren't fully hardy, and normally I can't be bothered with plants that need digging up and putting in the greenhouse, but it's so beautiful, it's worth it. But next year I'm not going to dig it up. It hopefully will survive if I really mulch it well and protect it from the winter frosts. And if it does, it's going to self-seed, and hopefully I'm going to have the plants all the way along this border, and it's going to look beautiful.
Good boy. Come on, then. I love Sue's optimism with her 40-year-old seed packet. 5.5p too, fantastic. Now here in the cottage garden, we've undergone big changes in the last few years. And now the tulips and the blue froth of the forget-me-nots are coming into their own. And the colour scheme here is pastels, pale, soft, and obviously that means a lot of pinks and all the shades of pinks. I experiment with tulips a lot. I'm also always after the perfect apricot tulip, and they're really difficult to find. But pinks are in abundance, whether it be the frilliness of the parrot cabana or one of my favorites, which is tulip mistress, which is just coming into flower now. Obviously, I want to keep the pastel colours going long after the tulips are finished, which will be about another 2 or 3 weeks' time. And I'm planting out now some sweet peas. And this is a new one on me. This is a variety called Senator. The colours of Senator are a white background, flushed with a sort of pink, just touched with chocolate. And it's an old variety from the 1890s, a grandiflora. Now what I do, I plant the whole thing out as a group, so 1 pot to each support. So I need 4 pots, 4 supports like this. And I always put them on the inside of the support, which means I can water into the middle and all the roots can have access. Now what sweet peas absolutely hate is being too dry. So you can see there's lots of mulch. These beds are very rich. They were vegetable borders for 20 years, and I put in masses of goodness. So when you're planting, just make a hole and take the whole pot out as one. Don't try and break the plants up, and just pop them in like that. If you haven't grown sweet peas before, these are climbers, so they need some support to attach themselves to. I use these wigwams, but I've used chicken wire before now. That works perfectly well. Just something that you can initially tie them to, and then once they get to June, the tendrils will support themselves, but you do need to tie them in maybe weekly for the first 4 weeks. There we go. That's one more. Right, all I need to do now, and this is really important, is to water them in. Now this area of the garden may not be as glamorous or as pretty as the cottage garden, but it's every bit as important because this is where we make our compost. And it's a very simple system. We have a bay where we just chuck everything that can be composted, and when it's full, we mow it. We spread it out on the ground here. You can see there's no grass, and we've got an old mower, and we just run it through the mower. And then it goes into here. When this is full, it gets turned into this bay. When this is full, it gets turned into here. And by now, you can see it's beginning to get compost-like. If when you take a shovelful or a handful of compost, and there are these little red worms that are called brandlings, then you know that the compost is being made well. You're doing the right thing. And then this is its final resting place. And we only use compost from this last bay. We use it for 2 things. 1 is on anything edible, and 2 as part of our potting mix. And for those 2 purposes, it's absolutely essential. But not everybody has the space, and not everybody has the time to do this. However, there are other ways of going about it. And we went to Sussex to learn about some of them.
Soil is the coolest thing that exists on the planet for me. We owe ultimately our existence to the fact that there is 6 inches of soil. And often when we think of biodiversity, we think of birds, bees and butterflies, but actually it's the microscopic stuff. At least 59% of the life on Earth is actually in our soils. It's the most biodiverse ecosystem on the planet. So I took a deep dive into soil science and became a soil nerd and compost enthusiast, to the point where composting is all I do now. Compost Michael is something I'm often called, or stopped in the street and told, "Hey, you're the composting guy, aren't you?" So I'm Michael Kennard. I run a social enterprise called Compost Club. So I go about collecting food waste from mostly residents, some businesses. And what I do is take all that food waste with tree surgeons' waste, wood chips, and turn it into what I call a living compost. I came into this as a grower, and what I realised was that the healthier your soil is, the healthier your plants are going to be, and ultimately the healthier we're going to be as people for eating that food. We come out for domestic households every 3 weeks. We take away the full bucket, leaving them a clean one. Every spring, members get some compost back, which is a really lovely exchange, so there's that whole kind of another closed loop, essentially. The first stage of making compost for us is using bokashi bran. It originates in Japan. It means to ferment organic matter, and it works anaerobically, so it's an outlier in terms of compost. You normally need oxygen. And we give it to our members, so they layer that into their food waste bucket with the food waste in a lasagna style. So it's all the way through the bucket, pre-digesting it and adding like a kind of, it's like adding rocket fuel into the system. So the next stage in our composting is to utilise what we call in-vessel hot composting. So we're using a compost tumbler, and it's the kind that's small enough that you could have at home in your back garden. It works really efficiently by creating the right conditions for compost to happen sort of 3 to 4 weeks. You could be emptying these. So we're taking a 50-50 mix of wood chips and our fermented food waste, and that goes into the tumbler like this. What you're left with at the end of a good maturation phase of at least around 12 weeks is a compost that's really abundant, really diverse in life. There'll be things, indications it's really good without a microscope, like a really sweet smell, and also visible fungi, which is a really good sign. So it's just got everything that plants need. So you have this super amazing, supernatural nutrient cycling plant fertilizer. So the best way to look at your soil would be to get a microscope and actually look at the life in there, and you can see, you know, who's here and in what quantities. And you'll see a clear difference in any compost that you're making to anything commercially that you buy. A well-made living compost, you'll have a whole plethora of microorganisms dancing across the slide. There's a microbe here called a protozoa, which is eating things like bacteria and fungi, pooping out plant-available nutrients, and there's loads of that going on. So there's all these rich colours, humus, basically. So it's just all manner of life, which is going to lead to all manner of life. Through most of my life, I'd suffered with quite extreme social anxiety. I was very, very shy, and actually through doing this work, people often say, "You can't shut me up now. I'm speaking for the microbes, and I've got a lot to say for them because they can't say it themselves." One of my main focuses now is actually on empowering and enabling other people to make really good compost. So one of the things I've done is come here to the Brighton Grub Hub, where they're producing organic food for local food banks. And we've set up some composting bays and a hot composting tumbler as well for them to use and produce their own compost to enrich the soil here. Hey, Becca, how's it going?
Hey, Michael.
This one's looking really good.
Yeah, we've just turned this one last week and it's ready to mature.
It's looking fantastic. That initial breakdown's really, really good. From this point onwards, you don't need to turn it too much now if you can introduce these compost chimneys. So just use a good solid stick create this little pathway all the way down to the bottom with a bit of force, wiggle it around, open it up, and you create this little, as I say, a little chimney, a little pathway for air. So you're allowing your aerobic microbes to flourish. You don't need to turn it so much. You can increase your fungal biomass as well. So just creating a much more efficient and better quality compost for you guys to use here.
Brilliant, thanks for your advice.
No worries. Living compost is really important for plants because it introduces all the life that they've evolved alongside. So plants will start to interact with all of this life from the moment the seed germinates, and in fact before, if you coat it onto the seed. And all this interaction is what I call plant intelligence. Here I've got a little growing trial that I've been doing. So we're using a premium peat-free organic compost, and we're using some of our living composts. I put 3 radish seeds in each one, and what we saw was pretty rapid germination in this one. This one was a little bit slower, and all 3 have germinated successfully here, and sadly in this one we've only got 1. So when we were potting on our vegetables, the ones that had the biology grew so much quicker, more so below ground in their root zone than they did above. If you can see yourself as a microbe farmer growing soil, you'll have naturally abundant and healthy plants. A really effective way of using your compost and actually making it go quite far in terms of biology would be to create a soil drench. You can use a compost tea bag, you can use an old pair of tights. Basically, you want to put a handful of compost into water. It releases a lot of the microbes into a water solution, which you can just water onto the soil. You're just adding these microbes in. It also works as a foliar spray, so if that goes onto the plants, it's actually really beneficial as well. Soil regeneration just makes me feel great. A friend of mine, he says that I found joyful service. You know, we're not apart from nature, we're a part of it. And so it's mine to do, it's my joyful service.
Well, Michael is spot on in the importance of compost in the soil. But it's interesting because the system that we've got here is very labour intensive. It's undoubtedly hard work. And there is a way to make good compost which takes almost no work at all. And that's to make a slow heap. And essentially a slow heap is just a pile of organic matter that you leave to slowly make itself into compost. So if you've got room where you can just pile things up out the way, it's really useful. But it does take at least 18 months. The second thing about a slow heap is that all those things that will break down more slowly can go on the slow heap. I'm thinking of hellebore leaves, for example. We've put a lot of Lysimachia in here. The one thing we don't are really bad weeds like bindweed, couch grass or ground elder, and we burn those on the bonfire, and then we put the ash on the compost heap. Now, the interior of this hasn't been touched for a couple of years. So I should find nice compost down in the middle underneath the bits and pieces that are going to take a while to rot down. So let's have a look. It'd be embarrassing if I don't. Now, what I'm going to do is put this sieve over the barrow so that anything that hasn't rotted can be sieved out. This is a homemade sieve. Nothing fancy about this at all. Simply a very broad mesh and then some chicken wire over the top of that, which is much finer. And so by sieving it now, it'll all be consistent size and shape. All right, we're now in the heart of it. This has just been left to pile up, but you can see that It's beautiful stuff. And this will be as full of life, if you looked under the microscope, as any other way of making compost. It has all the same qualities. Now, with a slow heap, you don't have to worry about the mixture of carbon to nitrogen, brown and green. You just chuck everything on. Right. There we are. Very nice compost. It's just beautiful. And I'll add this to our potting compost so that the young seedlings get a good start. And it's going to add life to it. That's the key. It's not so much nutrition, it's life. And that incredibly complex relationship between a plant and its roots and the soil. And increasingly we're discovering us as human beings too, particularly when it comes to consuming vegetables. Right, I will take this to the potting shed. And we are now going to visit one of your gardens, or in fact, more particularly, one of your front gardens.
Hi, I'm Molly. I'm from South East London, and this is our front garden. I'm just about to move out of my family home of 24 years, but before I move, I wanted to highlight my mum's amazing front garden transformation and some of the inspiration behind it. In my family, there are many generations of gardeners, beginning with my great-great-grandfather, who opened a nursery in 1906. So the space here used to look completely different. We had the flower beds around the wall and just grass in the middle. And then back in May, we decided to get rid of the grass and build 2 flower beds in the middle. One of the main reasons behind this decision is that in our back garden, we have lots of large oak trees, which means it's very shady. Whereas our front garden gets full sun throughout the day, providing the perfect conditions to grow a wide range of flowers and attract more pollinators. The other reason is that about a year ago, I started creating artwork from imprinting flowers into clay and casting them to create bespoke plaster artwork. My mum's love of gardening and my parents' supportiveness has provided me with lots of material to work with. We have grown most of it from seed like the statice, scabias, zinnias, cosmos, which make great cuttings for imprinting. It just shows what you can do in a small space.
Well, thank you, Molly. It's always good to see a front garden that is growing things. And by the way, if you've got a garden, front or back, that you think is especially interesting or has got a story to tell, then please do contact us. We'd love to hear from you, as ever. So go to our website and you get all the details on how to do that. Now, I've added in the sieved compost from the slow heap to the potting mix. And you can see I've probably added only a fifth in total volume. Now, although we call this potting compost, actually today I'm going to use it as seed compost because I'm going to sow some cucurbits, which is a fancy name really for the family of pumpkins, squashes, cucumbers, courgettes and gourds. Now, I've got 3 types. We've got Waltham butternut. We've got Crown Prince, which I grew last year. It's a really delicious squash. And we ate our last Crown Prince just a few weeks ago, so that's stored through the winter very well. I've also got another one here, Rouge d'Étampes, conventional big orange pumpkin, which I know will delight my grandchildren. It may not be the best to eat, but it's a joy to look at. Now, for pumpkins, I use a big pot and I keep them in that. My nice compost mix there. I'm going to start with this. So this is Rouge d'Étampes. Now, you always sow them on edge. Just slide them like a blade into the compost. And the bigger the seed, the deeper you need to plant it. Don't plant it on the surface. And the reason why you put it on edge is so that if it's wet and cold, it doesn't rot. Now, I'm going to put 2 in there, but I'm only going to grow 1 plant. So whichever is the strongest of the 2 I'll leave, and the other one I will take out. And I may discard it, I may pot it on, we'll see. But it is always worth putting 2. I will cover that over lightly. And then this is the critical bit. This must have warmth to germinate. It needs 20 degrees. So either put it on a heated mat or on a windowsill above a radiator. Now, if you've got courgettes, and I've got 2 types here. I've got Romanesco and I've got Black Beauty, but the procedure of sowing them is exactly the same. Courgette seeds look very similar to pumpkins. You sow them in the same way, 2 per pot. Put that back in there. Because courgettes have a running harvest from the first one you harvest, which could be as early as June, to the last, which could be as late as, well, October, if you manage it well. Now, I reckon 2 plants is absolutely plenty for a normal household. And like the squashes, they need heat in order to germinate. So at this time of year, some kind of extra heat is necessary. Moving away from food, I guess one of the highlights of many people's gardens at this time of year is the wisteria is starting to flower. And last May, Francis went down to Surrey to a garden that had a fabulous collection of wisteria in full bloom.
Once spring starts to spring, some plants go big in a whirl of colour, like rhodies and azaleas.
But some unfurl with a gentle grace, 1 flower at a time, and then create a bang. Like wisteria.
Wisteria can flower from May to July, depending on species, with colours from white to pink to deep purple. And they're set on strings of racemes.
These make incredible features in the garden. And because they live for 20, 50, or even for hundreds of years, they can be real companions for life, not just for one season.
Wisterias are strong, woody climbers, originally found twining up trees across Asia and the Americas. They arrived in Europe in the late 1700s, and horticulturists soon realised these plants didn't need cosseting.
One writer said they need no nicety of management and are impatient of the knife, which is a nice way of saying they're tough as old boots and they grow like mad.
The wisterias here are rather special. Some are over 100 years old, and they're part of the National Collection for Plant Heritage in Surrey. There's 28 different cultivars showing their range and breadth.
There are 4 main species of wisteria. There's the brachybotrytis like this and the sinensis, and they both flower fairly early. Then there are the later flowering ones, which are frutescens and floribunda. It's so rare to see them together, and it really allows you to appreciate how different and varied they are. This beauty here is Wisteria brachybotrytis okayama, and it was only planted 9 years ago, so you can see how vigorous and how quickly it will take a wall over, but it's so gorgeous. Now, the brachybotrytis wisteria have shorter racemes of flowers, but slightly larger flowers individually than other wisteria, and they're very scented. So standing here, there's a really rich and complex aroma coming off these, which is bringing in all of these bees. This is covered in bees. But it's the combination of the leaves and the flowers that set wisteria apart, and it's what makes them unique.
Leaves can range from rusty red to almost silver, setting off the flower colours. And floribunda wisteria can have racemes that reach 1 metre long. And though all wisteria twine up trees or pergolas, different species do it slightly differently.
This is a Wisteria sinensis, and it's a lovely white one called the Bride. Now, the sinensis from China twist anti-clockwise as they grow up, so you can see that twining happening. Whereas the floribundas and the hybrids over there twist clockwise instead.
Wisteria are part of the pea family, and their flowers also have a clever twist.
These inflorescences have a really beautiful way of letting all the pollinating insects know when the flower has been pollinated. So you can see these are unpollinated flowers, they're facing the right way, whereas these two have been pollinated and they are beginning to turn. Now eventually they'll turn about 180 degrees, so essentially their back is to the approaching bee. And it's just a way of saying, no, we've shut up shop, we're all done, go and find another flower.
As tough woody climbers, wisteria really can go big.
Look at that. Now, we're used to seeing them on trellises and walls, but that is a floribunda climbing right up a huge conifer, which of course is exactly what it would do in the wild. But I bet that one's been there for quite a long time.
But keeping wisteria and those lovely flowers closer to eye level is just about pruning.
Basically, in the summer, it's about cutting back this long whippy growth, and in the winter, it's about cutting the spurs back to just a couple of buds from the main stems. And that way everything stays neat, because look how old this is. This is a really old wisteria, and yet it doesn't need to get sprawling and huge if you prune it right.
And wisteria don't even need a pergola or a wall to bring a fountain of colour.
These really are so tough that you can prune them as hard as you like. So this one has been turned into a standard form. All you need is a very, very chunky stake to hold the weight of it, and then a hard prune will turn this into a tree-like structure that would fit even in a really modest-sized garden.
This is a hybrid called Wisteria crossvalderi Burford, and flowers early with these delicate blooms. Wisteria will be happier as a standard than squashed into a pot. And they can take a while to flower, but pruning encourages them to bloom. For me, having a wisteria is simply a must.
As plants go, I don't think they come much better than this. This is a resilient plant, it's a beautiful plant, and it's a plant that you can grow old with.
The question that I'm most often asked about wisteria is, people will buy a wisteria and it doesn't flower. Why isn't my wisteria flowering? Well, the chances are it's not flowering because it's been grown from seed, and they take at least 7 years and sometimes twice that time before they start to flower. So you can buy a perfectly healthy plant, but it's just not ready to flower yet. Whereas if they're grafted, they will flower much sooner. So if you're not sure, you're going to buy a wisteria, buy it in flower, and then you know that it's going to flower next year. But this is what I've come in for. This is a dahlia. Now, the reason it's been in the greenhouse is because I have forced it and made it grow quicker to provide material for cuttings, because dahlia cuttings work really well. This is a dahlia called Honker Black. Very nice dahlia indeed. Now, I've prepared the material for it, which is, you can see, 50% perlite and 50% compost, because it is important that you have really sharp drainage. And if in doubt, just go heavy on the perlite and light on the compost. Now, in order to take dahlia cuttings, you want to go right down to where the shoot grows from the tuber. So you need a knife, not secateurs, and if need be, go below the soil level. So I'm going to get in there and I'm going to cut like that. And what I'm taking is a basal cutting. I want that base where it connected to the tuber, because that's where the roots will come from. That's one. And one more, and we're in business. Right, having taken your cuttings, and you need to work fairly quickly because they're effectively dying, cut off any excess foliage. And I will use a dibber, but a pencil does perfectly well. Into the corner, like that. Put that in there. So we're going right down in. Water the compost, spray it, and then make sure it stays moist. A polythene bag over the top, having watered it, will do the trick. And normally, they will all come good. That makes 4 new plants, which we can pot on, grow on, and will go out into the garden and flower around about September time. The whole point of growing any of these plants is not as individual specimens, at least not here at Longmeadow. It's their role within the bigger picture, whether it's on the mound or in the cottage garden or the dual garden or wherever. And putting together plants, I think, is one of the most satisfying parts of gardening. And we went down to Bristol to visit a gardener who has learnt to love all kinds of combinations of plants, inspired by a holiday in Kent.
I start off every morning, even raining or whatever, with a walk around the garden and a cup of tea. The light and the noise is just fantastic early in the morning. But I just want to see what's popped up overnight. It's just a wonderful way to start the day. I'm Carl Suki, and I am an obsessed gardener. Although Sally, my wife, says she's very lucky that at least my obsession is something that other people can enjoy as well. This is Beth's poppy, and it's important you come and look at her in the morning because she's very delicate, as you can see, and if we get a strong wind or rain, by lunchtime, all the petals can be gone. And it is this ethereal air that she gives off. They almost float in the sky because the stems are so tall and slender, you almost don't see them. I just find it a very beautiful thing. I've always dabbled in gardening, various degrees of success, but it was the visit to Great Dixter in 2019 that really changed my gardening life and possibly my life as well. We went to Kent on holiday and I fell in love with Great Dixter, and I remember there was a little poster in one of the sheds that said you could go for a week there and work with Fergus, the head gardener, which was just fantastic. I talk about organised chaos, and it's almost, well, I find when I garden like he's done, you're sort of barely in control. And it's a bit like skiing. Like the faster you go and the nearer the edge it is, the more exhilarating it is. And I quite like that. But obviously the colour, which everybody gets excited about, he puts oranges next to pinks and various other things. But also he grows loads of cow parsley, which I know some people think is a weed, and using stuff that you're not supposed to use in gardens. And it's a little anarchic, which I'm quite fond of a bit of anarchy in a small way. One of the first things I did was widen the border. I don't know how wide that border is, 3-4 meters. But if the border isn't wide enough, then you can't put in enough plants to get this layering effect. And it's that I love, because it allows you to try combinations, not only the color, but it's all the different textures of the leaves and the actual shape of the plants. And, you know, that's what really gives me a buzz. I almost like to be just one step away from nature, if that's possible. And in a way, I want to replicate that on steroids within my own garden. If you look, I've got lots of nigella all over the garden. That's a self-setter, and that pops up just there next to the poppy. It looks absolutely beautiful. But self-setters are really exciting because you never know what you're going to get. It's like, you know, Christmas morning every day when you go out, you just don't know what you're going to get, and I love it. When I look at plants, I tend to not look at them as individuals. I try to think of them as combinations, and if I see something, I think, what will that look good with? And it's the combinations that excite me. And the best ones are the ones that just, you know, happen by chance, by complete serendipity. And I think, jeepers, that looks fantastic. And there's one where a plant has fallen over, and it's a hesperus, and I think the purple and the red are fantastic. So I didn't stand it up because I think it looks so beautiful. I'm really pleased with this on 2 counts. A, because it just looks beautiful, and the structure it adds to the garden is fantastic. Although, if we're honest, it's supposed to be a giant fennel. It's a rather short giant fennel. You would expect another 3-4 feet in a really good specimen. But I'm also pleased because I've waited 5 years for it to flower. I was given the seeds in 2019. And while it's still a wonderful plant and it merits being in the garden without the flowers, because you get all this wonderful froth, and early in the year, it'll come out, it starts frothing in February, March, when there's nothing else. And you combine this with tulips and it looks stunning. Also, I'm going to be really happy because I'll have my own seed bank now. I can collect my own. And whether I have to wait 5 years for the next one to flower, I don't know. One of the things I wanted to try and achieve was succession gardening. This is where the garden looks good for 10 months of the year. I think you're allowed 2 months off. You have your main framework of your border. There are shrubs and various long lived perennials that are hard working and give you your framework. And within that, there are little areas called planting pockets. At the moment, they've got the ladybird poppies in, but they will stop flowering by, don't know, middle of July, it depends. And then I rip them all out, and then they'll be replaced with dahlias, cosmos, zinnia, cannas, because I try lots of stuff and some stuff doesn't come through, so I don't actually know exactly what it's going to look like. The garden is constantly evolving all the time, and to do that I need more beds. So I do, when Sally-Ann goes to see her mother, I do nick a bit of lawn when she's not looking and turn it into a bed. Like this bed there, I think has been enlarged 3 times on visits to her mum. Although I have done a small cutting garden for her. And one of Sally-Ann's friends did describe me as the perfect husband because I made this cutting garden for my wife. So I'll take that one.
Come on. These beds here were made last year specifically for cut flowers. I sowed wallflowers in this bed last week, and they're just beginning to germinate, so that's good news. The hardy annuals I sowed last autumn, they'll be in flower very soon. And there's the first peak of the dahlias that I left out over winter in this bed, so unless we get a hard frost, they should be fine. And this bed, I put bulbs in. These are bulbs I hadn't grown before, and it's a very good way of trialing plants. Grow them in the bed, you can use them for cut flowers, and then if you like them, next year you can order more and put them in your borders or in pots. The daffodil, avalanche, they were really good. You've got a tall stem with really good fragrance. This tulip, which is called Spring Break, I'm not mad about the colours, although I'm quite liking Pretty Princess. It's a little bit short for cut flowers, but I like the colours. And then I've got Strong Gold, which I thought might work on the mound, but that yellow is too bright. So I've learned something. And the important thing now is to make sure I don't waste them and cut them. When you're cutting cut flowers, just give yourself as much stem as possible. A good tulip for cut flowers wants to have a nice, strong, straight stem, which this does have. I just think the colours are a little bit too lipsticky for me. A little bit too bright, but each to their own. I'm going to cut all these tulips while they're still looking good. And while I'm doing this, here are your jobs for the weekend. It's a little early to sow any runner or French beans direct into the soil. But if you sow them into pots now, they will develop into plants that you can put into the ground when the weather warms up. I sow 2 beans to a pot, water them well, and keep them somewhere warm where they can germinate and grow on. Most daffodils have finished flowering by now. So snap off the seed heads so that all the energy goes into the bulb for next year's flowering. But don't cut them back any more than that, and certainly no need to tie them up or tidy them in any way, but allow them to die back gradually. If you have been sheltering tender plants like these cannas and gingers, it's time to bring them outside and harden them off. Put them somewhere sheltered but exposed to the sun and rain. Go through them and remove any dead material and check that they're okay. Give them a drink, and then in at least a week's time, and maybe 2, you can plant them wherever you want them. I'm bringing out the citrus, which has spent all winter in the big greenhouse. They hasn't been heated, but they have been fleeced when it got really cold. And they've come through not too bad, but always when you keep citrus indoors, by spring, they are the worse for wear. They don't like it. So if you've got citrus that are indoors, if the risk of frost is diminishing, then bring them out. But if you're used to having frosts right up to the middle of May, wait. Now, when you bring them outside, water them, give them a really good soak, and you can give them a feed. You can either give them a liquid seaweed, you could take off the top inch or so of the compost and replace it with garden compost, but don't prune them yet. Because the paradise garden should have fruit in it. We've got the crab apples, which at the moment are absolutely glorious with their blossom. This is a variety called Everest. Quite early this year too. Normally this blossoms in May at the same time as the tulips are at their best, but as you can see, the tulips are just beginning. So it's a funny year, but that's always the way and part of the fun of gardening. You can never predict exactly what's going to happen. And that's it for this week. And the next few weeks are going to be a little bit different because Joe and Rachel will be with you in a private garden in Hampshire.
Joe and I have come to the edge of the North Wessex Downs to visit a garden called Mulverley's.
In just 14 years, this garden has been transformed from a hodgepodge of fields and football pitches into one of the UK's most exciting and beautiful gardens.
And I've been lucky enough to go there, and I can tell you, it's an absolutely wonderful garden. The week after that, we shall be at the RHS Malvern Spring Festival, and then in 3 weeks' time, I'll see you back here at Longmeadow. And the garden will have completely changed by then. So, see you in 3 weeks' time. Bye-bye.